Hey friends, Tim here. This video I wanted to go over how to do the pockets on the pullover hoodie. First thing to note is this is a kangaroo pocket, so the pocket goes from one side to the other. Okay, so this panel that you see here, this big rectangle, is front lower. And then when we look at the inside, there's two layers of pocket liner, and these are attached right sides together. So your hands on the inside of the pocket are touching the right sides of the fabric. So this is the wrong side of one layer and the wrong side of the other. For the rest of the tutorial, I'm going to be doing this at a smaller scale than the real pattern pieces. I'm also doing it with only half of each of these. When you cut your fabric, you'd cut on fold, so you'd have a mirror copy of this all as one panel. I've cut out two pocket liners with matching wings, as well as a front lower. My orange pen here is going to represent my seam line, and then I'm just going to tape things together. Paying attention to notches, we're going to arrange wing to pocket liner. We're going to put them right sides together, which I've done here. You see that these three notches line up. They can only go in this orientation, and the seam allowance at the top and bottom should line up. I'm going to go and I'm going to make a stitch right down this line. So we join the wing to the liner, and we folded the wing open. Now we're going to fold that seam allowance down against the pocket liner and make an understitch right along that edge. With that understitch complete, we'll repeat the same exact thing on the other side of pocket liner with the opposite wing, and then we'll make an exact copy of that one for this pocket liner. Okay, in this step, we're going to be attaching the inner pocket liner to the front lower. On my example, the inner liner is this black fabric. So first, make sure that your notches align here at the side and that both sides have the seam allowance across the top. Then we're gonna put these right sides together. Then we're gonna make a stitch from the dot here at the top notch to the dot down here at this notch. We're gonna make a stitch right down that side. The next step is we're gonna take our scissors and we're gonna make a small cut through the fabric just through the seam allowance, not through the seam line, right at both dots. Okay, with this seam created from dot to dot, I've opened the two pattern pieces. These are wrong sides facing up, and I'm going to push that seam allowance towards the wing. Now what I want to do is I want to make an understitch right along this seam allowance to stitch it down to the pocket wing. This little bit of an understitch will keep the liner from sticking out from the pocket edge. When you have these things right sides out, so this is the right side of the liner and the right side of front lower, you're going to pull the seam allowances away above the dot and below the dot. So now you have a seam allowance here, no seam allowance, and then a seam allowance. To prepare for joining your two liners together, the inner and the outer, I'm first going to take front lower and I'm going to just fold it out of the way so I don't stitch through it. And then what I want to do is with opposite liner, the outer liner, I'm going to lay that on top of the other one. I wrote on here wrong side of the outer liner, right? So the underneath of this is right side, and it should be touching the right side of your inner liner. You're basically going to come in from the side right above the notch. You're going to stitch right along this edge, right up to the top here. You don't need to stitch across this here because you'll do that later. And then down at the bottom, you'll do the same thing. From below the notch, you'll stitch over, you'll come down along this edge, and then we're gonna seal in the bottom. And again, this is only going through the two liners. I'm not going through front lower. Same thing here at the bottom, a stitch over, down this edge, and then I'm gonna close in the bottom just of the two liners. I'm not stitching through front lower. So once our two liners are joined together, you can open front lower back up. And when you look at it from the right side, I'm gonna make a small tack from the dot within the seam allowance of front lower at the top and bottom dots. And what that does is that just secures the edges of this pocket. So now there's an opening for your hand. The two liners are right sides together. And looking at the jacket again, this is front lower. As you come around, this is the inner liner, and it's been understitched so it doesn't billow out. And then this is the right side of outer liner, and that gets sewn as part of this whole assembly to your side panel. And then all three, the two liners and the front lower, get stitched across the center of the jacket using that 3/4 inch seam allowance. So I hope that helps explain the pockets. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I hope you enjoy your build.